The earth has a three-dimensional crust. Their bodies have a three-dimensional crust. But human beings are to... Have you ever thought of your body as being a temporary crust? I don't know whether geologists would like that. I'm not sure other specialists would. But still that's what it is. It is simply a materialized crust of slowed down energy. And that slowing down process permits you to know your body. It permits you to know the other forms of God. All the living forms around you. You get to know them because you can touch them, feel them, taste them, eat them. And you become them. And do you know that helps them become you? All things are to be used up. Nothing, no crusts are permanent. The crust of your body is used up, and you get a new crust. And the crust of the earth is used up, interestingly enough, in exactly the same fashion as the crust of your body is. And all of those living things are used up. And human beings have the ability to know those things. They know them by touch, taste, vision. They know them. Human beings are a mix of all those energies, of all those living forms. Human beings have in their total consciousness all of the divine forms which are found in separate, discrete objects in the world. You have all minerals in you. You have all systems of energy transmission in you. You have all vegetables in you. You have everything. You have the processes which lie behind divine form in any material slowed up fragment of divinity. You have all of that in you. Now, your task is to appreciate and know that, and live with the great beauty of that. You know full well also that you have lived all over the world. You know, you have to know the world. You have to know it because you have to now be in this part of the world, now be in that part of the world, now be in the other part of the world. You have been individually and in groups whipping around the entire earth as long as it has had a materialized crust and even before. In a very important sense, you are at all times balanced on the earth itself. And you come to live in different parts of the earth because it is there that in any incarnation that you make a contribution to it and that it makes a contribution to you. There is no way in which you can make a contribution to the earth without its making a contribution to you and vice versa. People think that they are removed from the earth and that they just run along the surface of it. It's all right for them to think that for a while. The time will come when they don't think that at all. Because the earth and its surfaces have different character. They hold different kinds of divine force. And those divine force and the balance of divine force is changed over time. So, you must gobble up the fruits of the earth at any time and place that you might happen to live. There are times and places where you have survived on a very tailored diet of rice. Times when you've had a lot of salt and mutton. Times times when you've had, in many lives, you have a special kind of physiology of both consciousness and body that allows you to survive and integrate the products of a particular region. The reason for that is that you must know, you must be part of the products of those regions. That's how you maintain your balance. That's how they are integrated. You see, the matter of the earth, and here we get into a very long and baroque footnote, stay with me. The matter of the earth, physical matter, must change. Physical matter all has to change. What happens with the physical matter that makes up your crust when you're finished with that crust? It returns to a central pool of energy and is used again. And while you have it, if you spiritualize it, if you divinize it, if you radiate it with the presence of God that courses through you, you increase the vibration, you increase the radiance of that matter itself. You get that point? You're only borrowing the matter on this plane for a time being to clothe yourself in it. You better treat it well. You better use it well. Because if you do, when it goes back into the pool from which matter will once again be formed, you will have improved it. It is your job to improve the matter of your body, the physical matter. And you improve the physical matter of your body by the quality of the life you lead. You see, one of the things that I spoke about this morning was the way in which the physical body is stressed and changed and modified by the presence and anchoring of increased divine energy. Well, that helps your consciousness, but do you know, although your poor little body is stressed, although it may have a painful time with you, you improve its matter. You improve its matter, so that when it goes back into a central pool from which additional bodies are made, you have improved mankind. You've done your part to improve yourself next time around. Do you understand that principle? Okay. It means then that you must have in mind that there is no way of just doing right by your wife or yourself or your children. You must do right by all of this world. And when you do something right for yourself, for your wife, for your children, to add to your wisdom, whatever, you improve all quality of matter. Now, one of the things that human beings do on this planet, everything is used up. Everything is just gobbled up and changed and loses its form, and then has the privilege of taking a new and higher form. As you process food in your body, you have the possibility of the carrot has sacrificed itself to your dinner. But by the quality of the life you lead, you may improve carrothood by processing it through the net, the radiant net that is you in this lifetime. It is not fair to the world and all the animal and vegetable products in it for you to have a restricted diet. You're not using yourself correctly. you are restricting the use that can be made of your love of God. Do you understand that? Secondly, in a spiritual life, to return to this unending problem of unwinding. In a spiritual life, you will, as you finish one set of sanskaras, gradually uncover another. Those one set of sanskaras may be from Asia, the next may be from the Middle East, the next may be from China, the next may be from Tibet, another may be from Africa. The knowledge coded in the structure of those sheaths of consciousness will incline you not only to motivational patterns which differ, to ideational patterns which differ, but they will incline you to subtle changes in nutrition. They will incline you to slight modifications in your diet, which will occur naturally. Now, if you have in mind some trendy view that what you need to do is have this and this and this and that's all, then you can unwittingly, by your provinciality of mind and health, restrict the ease with which those patterns of consciousness can be nourished and the meaning lodged in them freed. So that particularly in the West, one may find himself at one stage following subtly changing and modifying his pattern of his dietary intake, and then subtly changing it again, and then subtly changing it again. But for people who are in the process of unwinding, one can expect a subtle modification in diet, which will occur if you let it occur, and if you abide by what you know to be sensible systems of balanced nutrition, without getting caught up in this rigid formula or that rigid formula or the other kind of rigid formula. So that's a kind of general principle which I have observed time after time after time after time after time among people who themselves did not observe it. They did things, dietarily speaking, without even noting that they did it. They made subtle changes. They made modifications. But if you asked them, they wouldn't have noticed it. So the aperture of nutritional needs should be kept pretty broad, I think. And the possibility of a variation within those limits pretty broad limits, I think should be carefully considered. Now, that's one point. There are two so far. One, you owe the world and the living things in it the right to be gobbled up by you. And two, the way in which you gobble things up should change and should bring about a subtle change as different layers of your consciousness rise to the surface to program your actions, tastes, and inclinations at any period in life. 3. The idea of adequate nutrition supplying at all times adequate physical energy is suspect. That is suspect. Because you see, you are not just your physical system of energy. You're all kinds of layers. And some of those, and as you gather physical energy through nutrition and through other ways as well, The pattern of your consciousness or mind will dictate where the energy flow should go. It is quite possible, as I think everyone in this room must know, that there are times when you can eat ravenously, all you want, all you can, and still you can't supply an adequate energy basis. There are other times when you don't need to eat at all, and you can just fly around the room. Those are difficult periods. There are, of course, also periods where there seems to be a nice balance between the amount of energy felt and the pattern of nutrition engaged in. But I can tell you that the process of spiritual learning involves working at many different levels of awareness, consciousness, and the mind. And at some times there are periods when the purpose of good nutrition is to keep you exhausted. Got that? I'm going to repeat it. The purpose of good nutrition during some periods is to keep you exhausted. Because exhaustion will be felt primarily as a physical reaction. There are times when your physical body must be weakened. And the recognition of that weakness will invade your awareness as exhaustion. In fact, there are more times than I like to consider in the life of a spiritual aspirant when that will be true. Now the purpose is not that the reason for that is not that you've had bad nutrition, so you better change all your diet and eat forever whether you feel like it or not. Because you will notice that no matter what you eat or how much or in what way, you're still exhausted. Does that mean your body is not using energy? Not necessarily. It may very well be that the energy is siphoned, I don't, is redirected, is redirected to a level of your being which resides for the moment beneath physical awareness, but which needs all the energy it can steal from your physical body and from your nutrition to strengthen itself, to burst through. So this is going back to differences between winders and unwinders. This is not necessarily true of people who are not undergoing spiritual changes. I mean, they of course will be physical disorders, and there may be periods of that sort and so on. But it is a condition of life for many spiritual lives. I mean, waves of this. And it is, although I would caution you to be careful about nutrition, to be careful about health, and to get good physical counsel. I'm not suggesting you give those things up at all. What I am saying is that even with the best care of that kind, the most responsible attention to physical well-being and laws of nutrition and physical energy exchange, even with the best of that, there will be and should be periods in which that is experienced. It is not pathological. It is a condition of energy storing and nutritional storing, and it is a condition of perfect, in some instances and at some periods, perfectly normal weakening and in preparation to unfolding. Is that clear? Now, there is a third thing about a fourth thing about this set of relationships which has occasionally troubled me. I have occasionally seen people who could outwit this principle. I have occasionally seen people who were so knowing about nutrition, so skillful about vitamins and nutrition and jazzing up the physical energy resource, that they could bring about a quite inappropriate exchange of energy, tremendous physical energy, when these deeper processes were going on. I mean, I've seen a few experts who were so good at restricting nutrition to its role in physical energy that they could focus on that, and very skillfully and very well, and keep people really up physically. Find ways of keeping all of their energy going in physical channels. And then what happens when the broader process should be occurring? I have seen occasionally people collapse, and collapse very dramatically, by outwitting, by finding ways of inappropriately channeling nutritional energy only to a physical source, instead of to its deeper layers where it appropriately should go to. And in fact, that is an ancient spiritual technique. There are certain ways, known down through the ages, of handling nutrition so that the person can be turned into a super duper, unvarying physical energy engine, just going 16 hours a day at high speed. There are ways of doing that nutritionally. The purpose, when that has sometimes been done in the past, and those physical secrets have been used to do that among spiritual students, is to bring about a collapse of one layer of consciousness so that another layer can, under supervision, be almost manipulated for deeper layers of meditation. The word samadhi and entering samadhi has many, many meanings, but its most pronounced meaning is entering a deep meditative state. And one way that was anciently used to get people to enter states of samadhi was to exhaust their physical system nutritionally by beefing it and beefing it and beefing it up until the person just fell into a samadhic state. Well, that's all very well if people know what's going on. And there is a state, and it serves a particular purpose in growth. Those samadhi states are mostly inappropriate for the West, and they are mostly inappropriate for unwinders. But they nonetheless do occur. And I have seen, now in the West, what happens when someone falls into that kind of state of samadhi and semi-comatose state? He's said to be undergoing an acute depression, or maybe borderline catatonic. I've seen a couple of people who are in such states and brought about by nutritional excess of this sort, and who are really in old-fashioned Asiatic samadhi states. But they serve no purpose, and it's very difficult in this pattern of life to get people in it or out of it, and without an adequate preparation of years to get them in it and then to pull them out of it, its purpose is damaging. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that as one extreme example of the way in which people might get their dream of nutrition actualized. They might get what they really want, and that is a perfect diet that they can just eat and get the vitamins right and get the nutrition right, and they just have enough energy to zip, 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 zip until poof, a samadhi state can be entered. Now, that's just one example. There are many other kinds of psychological states which can be led to by people who know too much about nutrition and too little about human growth and consciousness. That was my fourth point about nutrition. 4 is square. And that's enough.
Should we take a question or two on food and nutrition while we're on the topic?
Sure, if there
Okay, are there any? Yes, there are, aren't there? Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. Yes, June.
How does nutrition relate with children and daughters? Because many times children come into our families and they have real set ideas about what they want to eat and what they don't want to eat. And how does that relate in a spiritual sense?
Let's see if I can repeat that. The question was, given the sometimes peculiar habits of our children for eating or not eating certain foods, what are we to make of it? That was a free translation.
What are we to do with our children who have their own eating habits that seem very different from ours and that seem very different from what we might think to be nutritionally advisable? Is that?
Yes.
Children have some sensitivities to food which adults often forget. Adults forget how it feels to have a certain unfamiliar texture on your tongue and throat. Adults forget how it tastes to have a combination of unfamiliar flavors blending for the first time. It's adults forget how it feels to be sensitive to changes in thermal sensation, which they have become accustomed to, but which their child, going through different stages of internal knowing of neuronal activation, which their child then may experience as new and difficult. Adults also forget how difficult it is to learn to swallow certain things. Not all things go easily down. And by the time you're an adult, or in mid-childhood, you've learned to make all of those accommodations to texture, glottal changes, and throat expansion and contraction. But adults forget how new and novel, how jarring and how difficult some of those activities can be. Adults also assume that all things that they taste, all senses that they taste, are similarly reckoned and evaluated by other people. They think if it tastes good to them, it will taste good to someone else. They have forgotten how awful a particular combination of textures, smells, and tastes seemed the first time they were entered into the mouth, and what a strain they could be. So, learning to taste, masticate food, bring about the appropriate muscle reaction for its swallowing, and to bring about the necessary accommodations to its fragrance, its taste, and the melding of that can be very difficult. It isn't automatic in all children at all. And there are even adults who lastingly march through life with this or that secret taste or textural or thermal hate. So that with children, these tasks are often unfamiliar, strange, jarring, and they must accustom themselves to them. One of the things which children always do, of course, is to bring unconsciously to bear on food preferences many, many silly, idiotic ideas that they were carefully taught and learned in other lives. And they present themselves as peculiar patterns of taste within a child which need to be changed. So there's that. I have often worked with children where some of the things that I have mentioned to you were very much at stake in their own sensory integration, and their parents or the people around them didn't recognize that at all. So I think children should be gradually smoothed into exploration of tastes and diet and so forth, and probably not hammered into this and that very, very fast. Does that help?
Okay. Yes, Rob.
In line with what you said about exhaustion being kind of an expectable, not normal state, I wondered if you could say anything about the need of sleep, and especially for those of us that feel like we can sleep forever and still want more.
The question is, given what Dr. Mackie said about exhaustion being an expectable state for spiritual aspirants, could he say something about the role of sleep?
Right, and specifically if there's any way of knowing how much a person really have worked.
And specifically in determining or knowing how much sleep would be right for a particular person.
Okay. I would like to say something about exhaustion before I proceed further with sleep, which I think is very important. One of them is that I didn't mean to suggest that always and everywhere one is, if he's a spiritual aspirant, he's going to be exhausted. As this nice lady has pointed out to me, nothing is always, and few things are everywhere. but there are expectable accompanying states which occur with the processes that I have been describing today. And exhaustion being one of the concomitants of some of those, it comes in waves, and there are periods of exhaustion with sanskaric unwinding. Now, patterns of sleep become extremely relevant at certain stages also of spiritual change. And there's a good reason for that, which I'm going to try and be clear about. First, you know that there are states of awareness. You know, you are, many of you are at this moment aware. Some of you might at this or succeeding moments find yourself pulsating into a different rhythm and nodding. When you pulsate into a different rhythm of nodding, and awareness closes down a little bit, there is a barrier. There is a barrier, a structural change between levels of your mind that are working. The one that's working when you're hyper alert is closed down a little bit when the one beneath it, which pulsates with a different pattern of life, a different pulsation of life, which may carry knowing with it, very important knowing with it, but not direct awareness. And then there are levels of sleep. Sleep physiologists chart out different levels of sleep, the designation being these days correlated with the electrical charges and patterns on the cortex with different stages of sleep. Okay, so there are barriers and levels of the mind, really. Now, a mind that is changing itself, is a spiritual mind. As sanskaras are releasing, the mind is changing its own structure. And as it changes its own structure, it will modify within that structure its barriers and its levels. The idea is, in the extreme, is to become aware of all levels of the mind, so that no barriers that separate into compartmentalization need be automatically tied off from other barriers. And in extreme cases, for example, you know that Meher Baba, for example, did not sleep in the usual sense of sleep. He could use, in fact did use, the totality of his mind, and he used the totality of his mind by will. By will. He decided how his mind was to be used and the patterns by which it was to be used. But all layers, as your mind changes, the amount of energy and time needed by some parts of by the different balance of the levels of your mind changes. You know, while you're asleep, parts of your mind are very, very, very active. Parts of your being are awake, while this part of your being, this crust of you, is asleep. And they are, as this crust of you is relaxing, that part of you is pumping ahead and working itself in a very, very complete way. The energy of life is focused now to balancing another level of the mind. So while you're asleep, your total being is just as busy as it can be. And it is doing work at various levels to integrate and balance the learning that has been going on while you are conscious. Now, one of the dangers of sleep deprivation and of not getting enough sleep is not that you can't learn to do it. People can learn to do it. People can learn to just shh. They can get nutritional techniques that aid that shushing process. But when that is happening, parts of their mind that need work and modification are being starved to death. They're being starved. You can starve parts of your mind to death by not sleeping. You shut off its function. So it's terribly important that patterns of... Now, when the structure of the mind is changing with the release of sanskaric threads, the barriers of the mind are also changing. What formerly has been completely unconscious is on its way into being a structure to be used in the present and future for increased awareness. Now, for it to do that, the structure of the mind must change. During sleep processes, there can be a redistribution and a change in structure of the mind, which cannot occur when one is wakeful. So there are periods when it is very important to have a lot of sleep, to yield to the redistribution of energy and the change of structure of the mind, which can only occur during sleep. So it's very important often in stressful spiritual lives to ensure that there is enough sleep. And there are periods when the repair work, the reorganization of the mind, can proceed much better in a sleep state than in any kind of awareness, a state of awareness. So there are very normal, very important, very deep, sleepy periods. Does that help? I have sometimes, now at the same time it is true that people who are involved in spiritual, in having spiritual forces increasingly at work often have changing patterns of sleep and wakefulness. And there will be periods when there's, when they can't get the sleep they would like to get. They just cannot. And other periods when they seem to need too much sleep.